Hello, welcome back to the Market Monitor. I'm John Michael Riley, OSU Ag Economist, and with the springtime we get a lot of activity with regard to our crops, and that also spills over into our crop markets. That's no different this year. We'll start with wheat. Wheat saw some positive days there leading into the end of March. Prices were elevated above $6 per bushel on the futures market. A lot of that a result of drought conditions that were kind of persistent through most of the wheat country. Since then, some rains to the north of us have put a little bit of pressure, but I think the biggest pressure that we're seeing with regard to wheat is exports. And so we're certainly seeing exports starting to lag a little bit. They've been keeping up pace for the most part through the beginning of 2025, but since then there's certainly some pressure coming from the export side of things, given a lot of anticipation of tariffs and just some retaliatory tariffs given all the new upcoming changes in regard to our administration. Bringing it back to Oklahoma, prices are about 20 to 25 to 30 cents below the futures market, depending on where you're at. I've been speaking to earlier in the year. We're speaking to weakening basis across most of our crops. That's still persistent in some of our other commodities, but we've certainly seen wheat basis improve from those weaker levels that we started 2025 with. Again, staying in Oklahoma, jointing in terms of crop progress, wheat is joining at 27% based on the most current crop progress report, which is right on par with where we were at typically at this year. In Oklahoma, certainly drought conditions are still persistent. All the heavy winds over the past week or so certainly haven't helped that, but elsewhere in wheat country, weather conditions have been a little bit better. Moving our attention to soybeans. Soybeans are certainly still under some pressure. We've been talking about the bean to corn ratio. That stayed very consistent, about 2.2 to 2.25, and that's really putting a little bit of extra emphasis on corn. Corn seems to be the more dominant crop in regard to price relative to corn price relative to soybean price. So the pressure in the soybean market is still there. In terms of corn, talking about it buying some acres, that's still somewhat prevalent in the marketplace. The more recent WASDE report was a little bit positive for corn. We actually saw those numbers from the World Ag Supply and Demand Estimates report help out corn. Didn't necessarily hurt soybeans, but certainly helped out corn, and that's kept that bean to corn ratio kind of in favor of corn overall since we've seen that report come out. Going back to basis for these two crops, still seeing a lot of weakness with regard to soybean basis and corn basis here in the state. Much weaker basis relative to where we're typically at this time of the year. It's been that way for most of 2025. That's still persistent, something I'm keeping my eye on. I would encourage you all to keep your eye on as well. Wrapping up with cotton. Cotton prices, have seen a little bit of a roller coaster ride since the middle of February up through now, and a lot of that has to do with trade expectations and how our U.S. dollar is relative to other currencies. We've seen some weakness over the past few days with regard to cotton. Prices have dipped back below that 70 cent per pound mark, and so long as that dollar stays strong, it's probably going to continue to be some pressure putting on cotton prices moving into the spring planting season. That's going to do it for me. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.